People everywhere are starting to listen to him. He's going on French, British, Italian, Japanese television.
This is the Wide World of Weingarten.
Welcome back, Wide World of Weingarten. It is Tuesday, March 15th, the Ides of March. Beware the Ides of March. Baseball's back. Spring training starts on Thursday. Have a lot to talk about. I'm just going to jump right in to the baseball news from the past couple days. There's so much news that I'm going to be skipping around and trying to get through everything, but I know I'm going to miss some stuff, like the Josh Donaldson trade to the Yankees barely even registered with me, and the most recent news today about the private sector vaccination mandates in New York and what they mean for the Yankees and potentially Aaron Judge, how he wouldn't be able to play at home. I very much expect that to change before opening day. I can't imagine that the New York City government is going to disadvantage the Yankees significantly. That's what we say is bad for business. But it is enough to potentially hold off on any Aaron Judge MVP tickets for me, although he wasn't really on my radar that much. I would absolutely hold off at this point. But like I said, free agency is underway and the deals have started to happen, but you can see there's still a lot of holding out until sort of the top guys in the market set the price. A lot of other guys aren't going to sign until they see what Freddie Freeman, Carlos Correa, Chris Bryant, etc. get. Then you'll start seeing a cascade of moves after that, but it's really going to take some of these remaining free agents to set the market price until we see Freeman, Correa, Bryant, Conforto, Schwarber, Trevor Story, Nick Castellanos, Isaiah Suzuki, etc. All come off the board, and that's some serious talent. That is talent that could make the difference between a playoff and a World Series team. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and the beat writers are back in Florida and Arizona. They're getting more access to the teams, getting to interview managers again. So valuable, good information is starting to come out. For example, out of Baltimore, Roche Kubatko, the beat writer in Baltimore, he was interviewing the O's manager, Micah Hyde, and Hyde said that getting starting pitchers up to 5 innings in camp is going to be the best case scenario for the Baltimore Orioles. Getting starters up to 5 innings for the first couple times through the rotation. If it's going to be the best case for the Orioles, it's likely going to be the best case for most teams. So I expect there to be sort of pitching shortages and shorter starts at the beginning of the season, at least I'd say beginning 2-3 weeks as guys sort of work themselves back into to shape. The Astros, jumping around the league here to talk about the Astros for a minute. In the event that they don't re-sign Carlos Correa, it means they are likely going to start either Jeremy Pena or Aledmas Diaz at shortstop, also potentially Pedro Leon. I bet Jeremy Pena to win the AL Rookie of the Year at 25-1 at Westgate. I bet Pedro Leon at 60-1, also at Westgate. Those odds might be slightly shorter by the time this podcast comes out. In the event they are shorter, I'd still play them down to 20 and 50 respectively. But Westgate's the only place that has a number on Pedro Leon, and it has the best number on Jeremy Pena. Pena's had 2 good off seasons playing in the Dominican Winter League. He's 24. He's not bad. I actually like Pedro Leon a little bit more, and you can check Point Spread Weekly and VSiN this week. I'll have some articles on some of these guys that I'm betting and why, and I'll explain some more on Jeremy Pena and Pedro Leon in the article. But it's definitely possible that Correa comes back with the Astros still. That would end up tanking this bet potentially for a shortstop. But I still think Correa is going to end up in Baltimore, or potentially he could take a 1-year deal with a number of teams. The Padres have an opening at shortstop all of a sudden. I'll get to that in a minute. The Dodgers I don't know if they would necessarily want Correa. I know they would. I know they consider anything. They would definitely run the numbers on anything. But I could see him linked to the Dodgers on a 1-year deal. I could see him linked to a lot of teams on a 1-2 year deal. But if he wants a big contract, and I expect that his agent Scott Boras is not going to allow him to sign a long-term contract for a penny less than Corey Seager got, so a penny less than $225 million, or at least the same average value yearly. But I'm personally very interested in where Correa ends up. I think he's the best player on the board, and it has a whole lot of implications for other potential player futures. If he jumps to the NL, he becomes one of the favorites in the NL pool. There's all sorts of stuff to consider there. Then, I also really want to point out something real quick with Pedro Leon. When you're looking at his numbers, if you're comparing like his early Cuban League numbers to try to figure out what he's going to project in the majors, it's hard because he was like 19 and he's playing in the Cuban major leagues where you're going up against physically physical adults. Like they might not be the best skill players, they might not be major league, but these are 25, 30-year-old, in some cases even 40-year-old grown men. And you're playing against them at 19. So to see a guy like Pedro Leon, who hit a lot of home runs at 19 and in Cuba against grown-ass men, you end up escaping Cuba. You don't play organized baseball for 2 years. It takes a while to get back into that. I think Pedro Leon at 60-1 is a serious upside, especially if he gets a starting spot potentially at outfield, shortstop. He could force his way, into the starting lineup early in the year. But I really like Pedro Leon, and I think you if you're looking at his minor league numbers, you have to take a bunch of things into account: the talent level he's playing against, and also the amount of time in between defecting and playing organized baseball. This is, I could see a huge jump from him this year. It wouldn't surprise me. But moving on to the Padres, obviously the Padres are one of the biggest stories. The news came out yesterday that Fernando Tatis has a wrist injury, a fractured wrist, and potentially out for at least 3 months. So he's immediately killed his MVP chances. He was one of the MVP frontrunners, which he never should have been. But now he's absolutely, no chance of winning. And the big tweet yesterday was from Jesse Rogers. Probably not a great thing. When Fernando Tatis was asked when his motorcycle accident happened, he responded, "Which one?" I remember the news that there was a motorcycle accident came out in December. The San Diego beat writers said there was nothing to worry about, he was totally okay. I said, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. And here we are. Training camp opens, and what a surprise. Fernando Tatis has a serious injury. I mean, I already thought he was kind of an idiot, and I wasn't too high on him last year. If you've seen me on Twitter, I was very open about him not being the MVP, and he ended the year fighting with his own teammates on camera. While the Padres were imploding in spectacular fashion. So he blew the MVP last season, and then he opened up as one of the front runners this season. He's already blown it before the season's even started. So, his odds have already drifted out. I've seen 3-1 jump to 14-1. I'd double that again. If I was booking it, I'd book it at 30 or 40-1 right now. I'd be happy to book money on that, but it's highly unlikely he can contend for an MVP after missing 3 months of the season, especially with the other top, the Acuñas and Sotos of the world to compete against, Mookie Betts, etc., Matt Olson, all sorts of guys, Austin Riley, who have a very good chance of playing a full season, and Tatis doesn't. So Tatis is out for MVP. And then beyond Tatis here, the implications for betting, it bumps Machado to a legit MVP candidate. He's now the best player on the Padres offense. If they do somehow beat the Dodgers and win the division, I would probably think somebody has to get MVP consideration. Maybe some people will say, Cronenworth at 100-1. I wouldn't go that crazy. I do have 100-1 I like, though. Get to that in a bit. Machado is a serious MVP candidate. I don't have a problem betting him at 35, 40 to 1. Those numbers are available out there. I think he's down to 25 at some books, 35 still at DraftKings last I checked. And then CJ Abrams, there's a guy that I was thinking was likely a year away from from MLB this year. Now he has a much clearer path potentially to playing time with Tatis out. And I bet him at 50 to 1 to win Rookie of the Year in the event that he forces his way onto the Padres and into the opening day starting lineup. There's a lot of rookies in various camps that kind of fit that profile right now. Julio Rodriguez in Seattle, CJ Abrams in San Diego, both guys I'm very high on. Those are guys who can force the issue with a great spring. They can get on the opening day roster. They could force their teams to carry them, and not do the service time manipulation. But back to Fernando Tatis real quick. I'm very concerned about this injury. I was already concerned about his shoulder injury, and I'm very concerned about this wrist injury. A lot of people are saying, well, it's his non-dominant wrist, so it's not that big of a deal. I think that's bullshit. This is a fractured scaffold bone. Those don't always heal correctly. I know a dude who broke that bone playing soccer. He's had multiple surgeries, and it never healed correctly. Those bones get the least amount of blood of any bone in the body, so it has a very low healing rate comparatively. That's my my doctorly research for you. And keep in mind that this wrist injury and the healing from it is all to come back and try to hit 99-mile-an-hour fastballs for a living. So there's a very real chance that Tatis's power has peaked, and if his K rate doesn't come down, he could be a really good Major League Baseball player, but it's possible that we've seen the last of his greatness. So in some regards, congratulations to him for locking up that contract before, but you have to be an idiot to ride a motorcycle when you have a $300 million contract with a baseball team. So I don't know. I don't really feel bad for him, but I hope he learns and rehabs and comes back, because baseball's better with players like Fernando Tatis in it. But it's unfortunate because he's probably not going to win an MVP anytime soon, and we've seen the last of that. So not going to be talking about Fernando Tatis for a while probably. On to the Reds. The Reds are blatantly tanking. They've sold off anything of value that they can so far in the last week. Sonny Gray to the Twins, Jesse Winker to Seattle, Luis Castillo likely not far behind either one of them. The only upside is the departures of Gray and likely Castillo going to open up rotation spots for Hunter Green and Nick Lodolo, both potential Rookie of the Year candidates. Green probably has an inside track on the two. He's a very hard thrower. You could throw 140 innings or something, make a case. He's going to have a very low ERA, but Hunter Green, guy to take a look at. Got a lot of hype behind him. The Reds, though, the Reds are absolutely they're going to be a bunch of losers this year. It's hard to win games when Ken Griffey Jr. is your sixth highest paid player in 2022. So it really wouldn't surprise me if we even saw Joey Votto request a trade earlier at some point in the season, because he's does not have a lot of time left in his career, and he's not going to stick around for this rebuild. So it's potentially time for Votto to chase a championship somewhere else. The team that acquired the players from the Reds, the Mariners, they also signed Robbie Ray, the reigning AL Cy Young this season, and they just acquired Jesse Winker. It's a pretty solid set of acquisitions, and Eugenio Suarez coming off 90 wins, adding those three guys is not bad. Winker gives them a legit superstar, even if he's not a household name. Only 6 hitters have a higher WRC plus than Winker since the start of 2020. Juan Soto, Bryce Harper, Fernando Tatis Jr., RIP, Vladdy, Freeman, and Corey Seager. That's the end of the list. Those are all the players who have a higher WRC plus than Jesse Winker in the last 2 seasons. Pretty solid company there. So Winker actually 100 to 1 to win MVP at Westgate. I'm betting that by the time this comes out, that number might be gone. It's good down to about 70, 60. I'd still take a shot. That's my Ohtani this year. I'm right about that. Probably not for a week or two. So if you're listening to this, congratulations, making it almost 15 minutes into this podcast. You're getting 100 to 1 shot on a MVP who's in company with Soto, Harper, Tatis, Vladdy, Freeman, and Corey Seager. All those guys are probably, under 10 to 1. Harper, Soto's 2.5 to 1. All those guys are under 10 to 1 except Seager. Seager's like 25, 30 to 1 on a bad team. So give me Winker 100 to 1. Like I said, I'd play that down 80, 70. Still good. Wouldn't go past 50, 60 is sort of where it's getting to, not particularly interesting. But I mean, DraftKings opened it up. They opened it up 35. So I'm happy with the 100 there. The Texas Rangers, speaking of Corey Seager, they added Corey Seager, Marcus Semien, John Gray, and Mitch Garver. The Texas Rangers' best players are now Corey Seager, Marcus Semien, John Gray, and Mitch Garver. And Adolis Garcia, I guess. Still a lot of regression to come there, but this team's probably still a year away from being a year away. But Corey Seager, Marcus Semien, nice core to start with at least. So they're getting something going in Texas. Keep an eye on them early in the season, see what's going on there. Then the Marlins. The Marlins made a little bit of a move under the radar that I like. They signed Willens Astudillo to a minor league contract, and if you listen to my show or you see me on Twitter, I shit on the Marlins a lot. There's a lot of good reasons to shit on them as a franchise. They're just not committed to winning, and they're cheap, and the baseball would practically be better off without them. And there's a lot of teams. It's not just the Marlins, but Marlins, Oakland. Baseball would just be better off if these owners sold their teams, or if we just didn't have to see rich people pretend like they were poor and couldn't afford to try to win. It would really be better off without some of these teams. But since we do have to suffer through rich people pretending to be poor, we get Willians Astudillo El Tortuga, the MVP of the Venezuelan Winter League, and he can actually play baseball. He's called El Tortuga for a reason, but he's a baseball player. He's a ball player, and I'd love to see the Marlins find a way to give him 400, 500 at bats. If they promise me 500 at bats from Willians Astudillo with that starting pitching staff they have, I would promise the Marlins I would give them at least 5 innings of my attention twice a week. But yeah, that's all I really want to say about the Marlins today. Let's not focus on loser teams too much. That's one of the things I don't like focusing on loser teams in baseball. I just want to ignore them. Like the Oakland A's, they've done this whole thing. One of the greatest trick that Moneyball's played on people is to convince them that trying to win with less is good, and there's nothing honorable about Moneyball. It's a joke to me, and I just don't want to spend time talking about bad teams. I want to focus on these organizations that are actually putting time and advanced analytics and building sustainable things. Oakland is, imagine playing for Oakland, being Matt Chapman or Matt Olson, and just knowing that the team's going to move you for some other assets because they don't want to pay you. They don't respect you enough to pay you. It's got to suck to know that as an athlete. I said the same thing about Freddie Freeman. It's got to suck to know that the team that you put your whole career into has just basically said you're not worth us paying you the market rate for. And that's baseball. It's a business, but I like to focus on the teams that are doing good things and not the teams that are cheap losers. So jumping back around for a bit, St. Louis going to West Palm Beach. Jack Flaherty is not throwing yet. He's being sent for a medical evaluation on his shoulder. It's not what you want to hear with less than a month away, no time to stretch out, that one of your starting pitchers, your ace, is having a shoulder evaluation. Not great. Speaking of Freddie Freeman and Matt Olson, the Braves have officially moved on from Freddie Freeman. They signed Matt Olson, gave him $168 million. That was some of Freddie Freeman's money. I'm sure Freddie Freeman's getting more money than that. Olson, one of 6 players who were in the 85th percentile or higher of hard hit rate and 75th percentile or better in strikeout rate in 2021. So I don't have that list of the 6 in front of me, unfortunately, at the moment, but it's a rarefied group of people. It makes him a potential MVP candidate, and the Olson-Riley first base, third base connection is a very good combination, and not much of a step down from Freddie Freeman. It's just unfortunate that players don't stay with their organizations like this anymore. Then in some news that slipped by most people last week, and it's of interest to me. I don't know how much interest it is to everybody else, but it is something to keep in mind for 2023. The Cuban Baseball Federation, also known as the Asociación de Peloteros Cubano Profesionales. You love my Spanish accent. Everyone loves my Spanish accent. They say that the Cuban players in MLB and other leagues will be able to represent Cuba in international competitions starting in 2023. So the 2023 World Baseball Classic should be interesting. We'll finally get to see an all-Cuba super team, which is something I've wanted to see for a while. It means potentially we'll get to see Randy Rosarena, Luis Robert, Jorge Soler, the Gurriel brothers, Yordan Alvarez, Jose Abreu, Yohan Moncada, Leonis Martin still playing center field in Japan. He's an elite center fielder, could play center field in MLB tomorrow. Aroldis Chapman, Raisel Iglesias in the bullpen. It's a pretty good baseball team right now. They just got to cobble a pitching staff together. There are some Cuban pitchers in the major leagues and in other foreign leagues. They would also get Livan Moinelo in the bullpen, so they would have Moinela, Iglesias, and Chapman for the 7th, 8th, 9th. That's pretty formidable. You just got to get 5-6 innings out of the Roenis Eliases and Vladimir Gutierrez's of the world, which is easier said than done. But that's a baseball super team right there, and it's going to be interesting to watch. I'm going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and talk about some more stuff. Got a lot more to talk about. Want to talk about some NBA stuff for a bit, and then talk about Tom Brady. So stay tuned. I'll be back in a minute. Going to just take a quick break. Welcome back. Wide World of Weingarten. I just wanted to talk about the NBA real quick, even though I am known as one of the world's worst NBA bettors. I'm not I don't bet the NBA for limits like I do baseball or other stuff. I mostly bet basketball recreationally, and I'm aware that I'm not a plus EV basketball bettor. I'm not mostly trying to be. I'm just trying to have some fun. But I have been fading the Lakers every game blindly for the last couple weeks, and I'm just going to continue to do that till their season ends, because I mean, this team's just shown you what they are, and it's no offense to LeBron James. You know, LeBron James, I've seen him go out there and do things that, you know, just the coming back and beating the Warriors. He just physically beat a whole basketball team by himself, you know, like, there's no disrespect to LeBron, but he's going out there and playing with a bunch of bums this year, and they're not a cohesive team. They're not playing like a team. They don't want to be there. You know, they're not going to turn it on for the playoffs. This is so if you think they're just going to show up and turn it on for the playoffs because 37-year-old LeBron says they're going to turn it on, I got some bridges to sell you. So I'm just going to keep fading the Lakers every day for $500 or $1,000. But I was thinking maybe like, you know, if I had access to those same game parlays, and I don't, but I know other people do, maybe I would bet like the Lakers opponent money lines with LeBron alt total points, because I know he's been scoring a lot lately. Maybe you take like over 27.5 or over 30.5 and play it with the other team's money line. Maybe you get a good price on that. I don't know. It's just something I was thinking I was going to look into later today to add to my Fade the Lakers portfolio, just to keep myself interested in some non-baseball stuff for the next couple weeks. And then the MVP. I know a lot of people are interested in basketball futures, and like I said, I don't watch a ton of the NBA. I get most of my NBA takes from my followers on Twitter these days. I do know some of the best and better NBA bettors in the world, though, and every once in a while I ask them a question or two. Haven't lately, though, so no insight from sophisticated bettors here. But if I had a vote, for MVP, I wouldn't vote for Joel Embiid first place, and I'll tell you why. And I'm sure you, the more sophisticated NBA watcher, could give many counter arguments against this based on his statistics and tell me how great he is, whatever. Like, I know he's a talented big man. I'm well aware of his talent. I've seen him play. There's no, you don't need to convince me how good he is, but we're talking most valuable player. The last two games of his I've caught a couple minutes where I've caught a couple minutes of. It was 76ers getting beat by the Nets last weekend. And last night, the Nuggets beating the 76ers in Philadelphia, 113-110. I don't think Embiid took a shot the last 4 or 5 minutes of the game. And again, like I said, I'm sure the counterpoint is there's a bunch of performances you could pull up and show me that he did some crazy stuff versus, the Wizards or the Heat or some team I don't care about, whatever. Like I said, I don't watch every game anymore. I don't follow the NBA every day. I'm sure you could make all sorts of counter arguments why I'm totally wrong, but frankly, like I saw him go head to head against Kevin Durant, who probably has a much more legitimate MVP case if he wasn't injured part of the season, and Nicholas Jokic, who won last year, I think, and probably should win again this year. But he came up in the losing end of both of those, and I mean that's really like I don't really need to even look past that. I just watched him play against two of the best players, two other MVP contenders. He lost both times. It's not MVP stuff to me, unfortunately. And I know it's an individual versus team thing, whatever. If you're holding a big number on him, and there are a lot of people who got 30s and 40s and ones, all sorts of stuff, I mean, it just kind of sucks. But, take it with a grain of salt because it's coming from me, the world's worst NBA bettor. But I am a fairly decent talent evaluator, and I'm also a fairly decent handicapper of voting, bodies and how they go. And I just don't see Embiid winning unless they go on a tear here at the end of the season or something. So if you're looking to get into the NBA market, I would fade him. I'm not telling you I know who's going to win, but if you can get, a field bet or something, consider that. I don't know. Jokic is, I think you say Jokic. I don't really know. I don't really care either. But yeah, I think he's going to win if I had a vote. That's how I'd do it. Then my other last uneducated opinion here is last night I saw Draymond Green. I call him Draymond. He was back with the Warriors, and they won. And he was plus 24 in 20 minutes on the floor. Steph Curry had 47 points. A healthy Draymond and some Warriors 2-1 to win the West is interesting. I know 2-1 super short, but they're going to be favorites every round of the playoffs, except if they somehow meet the Suns in the Western Conference Finals. I think again, I'm totally not up to date on the playoff scenarios, but 2-1 Warriors win the Western Conference. Tempting to me. Might add that to some accounts this week. Then. There's some much bigger news that I wanted to sort of. I could talk about Tom Brady, tell you, Tom Brady's back, but there's 100 shows that have all already told you Tom Brady's back, and what am I going to add that hasn't already been said? Just reminded me of Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail, and Hunter S. Thompson recounts Ed Muskie losing the New Hampshire primary, and he gets on an elevator to announce he's out of the race. His wife's in the elevator with him, and his wife looks over at him and tells him, Now that you're out of the race, Ed, we can spend a lot of time together. And by the first floor, Ed Muskie was back in the race. So that brings me to Tom Brady, who announced his unretirement after a brief decision to see what life is like after football. And I'm really not surprised that he announced his unretirement. It's actually a very common thing for athletes in all sports to have no clue what to do with their lives when sports ends, and especially when you're a quarterback and your entire life is around training and football and week in, week out, all the stuff you do. It's hard. And Tom Brady, is as everyone loves Tom Brady, and as great as he is, it's no different for him. He woke up one day and tried to figure out what to do with his life and couldn't figure out what to do. And I'm sure his crypto investments were going down. He saw inflation was going up and said, well, I got to go out and get another $25 million or whatever. I don't know. I don't know why Tom Brady came back, to be honest, but I'm happy for him. The NFL is better with Tom Brady. It's fun to watch. I respect his competitiveness. I don't really have to go into how great Tom Brady is. Everybody already knows. But I was just saying some nice things about the Westgate recently, and I'm talking about how I've made some bets there, and they're a pretty fair book. I don't have like a personal problem with them or with anybody there. I've always, had a good I've had good conversations, and I'm friends with people that work there. Like I talk to them, and the things I say, my opinions on sports books and my opinions on the sports betting business don't impact my friendships with people who work on the other side of the counter, because they tend to understand where I'm coming from, and it's not personal. Like I'm not saying like I don't like you personally. I understand like you have bosses and VPs and people you report to, and you don't get to make every decision unilaterally. It's not, the world's not black and white when you're working at in these types of jobs. Like, so we have respect for each other, more or less. There are people I don't like as well, but like you always benefit from having respectful relationships with people than being an asshole and being an adversary. No one's going to help you make a bet if you're a jerk to them all the time. So, I try to have good relationships with as many books as possible. And I always say that I'm willing to talk about the good. I'm willing to talk about the bad when it comes to betting, gambling, sports books. Like, I'm going to tell you how it is. I'm going to tell you my experience. If I have a good experience with a sports book, I'm going to tell you I had a good experience with that sports book. If I had a bad experience with that sports book, I'll just tell you I did not like the way they did it. I'm large and contain multitudes. That's Walt Whitman. You got Hunter S. Thompson. Now you got some Walt Whitman today. So there was an article in the Las Vegas Review-Journal this morning by Todd Dewey titled "Superbook VP Wonders If Bettors Had Inside Information on Tom Brady." Now that's just a bad headline to begin with, and that's not Todd Dewey's fault. That's his, the copy editor's fault, or whoever did the headlines. It's not the reporter's fault. But that's an absolutely totally misleading headline to begin with. There's the inside information. What are you talking about? There's no SEC. There's no body to regulate inside information. This is an information game. I mean, I don't even know. I'm kind of like at a loss to even to the premise of this is already offensive to me. But what does it matter what information somebody had or who had it when? I wanted information on something. I called the Pentagon. I wanted to know something in a book I was reading last week. I called the author and asked him. Gambling is about information. That's how markets work. It's an information race. I'll repeat that again. This is how markets work. It's an information race. Maybe the people at the Westgate need a sign in their office that says, "This is how markets work. It's an information race." Yeah. And you can always have better and faster and more sophisticated models, but you never have an excuse for somebody else to outwork you or out-hustle you, especially when you're a giant book. I mean, if you're getting out-hustled, you're just getting out-hustled. And Westgate's upset that somebody bet the Bucks at 60-1 on Thursday to win the Super Bowl and 30-1 to win the NFC, and someone, or the same person, hit them both again. They lowered it to 25-1, and they got hit again. Okay, so I'm going to quote Lefty Rosenthal here. I'm going to quote Ace Rothstein, or Robert De Niro playing Ace Rothstein, playing Lefty Rosenthal, whatever, from the scene in Casino titled "Ace Fires Idiot Cowboy." So you got $3 bets in 20 minutes. Why didn't you pull the odds? Why didn't you call somebody? Why didn't you see what was going on? Didn't you realize what was going on by the second bet? Like what? You didn't realize you were being set up on the second bet? Like, listen, like what? This is a business. This is a job. Like, you could pull the odds. You don't have to sit there and just take it. You weren't crying when people were betting $5,000 at 60-1 the day after Brady retired, and now you're going and crying to the Las Vegas Review-Journal. That you're literally going crying to the local newspaper about taking some futures wagers from a known sharp. That is just so pathetic. Like, I'm embarrassed for you. There's no doubt in my mind the information leaked sometime in the middle of last week, is the quote. This is concerning. I don't think I've ever said the NFL really needs to investigate something, but this is something they need to look into and how it got out, because there are many books that took some sizable wagers in the middle of last week. Okay, so what? You took wagers in the middle of last week, in the middle of March, on a market that you don't even have to offer, that nobody says. There's no law that you have to book NFL futures in the middle of March during free agency in the off season. There's no law that said you had to put up the Bucks at 50-1, knowing that it was absolutely possible for Tom Brady to change his mind. This is just like I said, this is embarrassing. This is embarrassing that you would go out there and frame the story like this. That you took some sharp bets, you took some futures bets from a sharp bettor, and you're crying about it. Don't put the market up then. Put a limit up. Put a $500 limit up then. This is all, basic bookmaking 101 stuff. I have a pamphlet from Roxy Roxborough behind me that says half of this stuff. I could pull it out and read it to you. It cost me $40 on Amazon several years ago, and I learned bookmaking from it. It's a pamphlet. Roxy Roxborough wrote it. It's the best book on bookmaking, out there, probably, or most, it's a easiest guide to understanding bookmaking, at least. But I'm sorry, Jay Cornegay. I'm sorry that you had the futures market up in the middle of March. I'm sorry that you didn't lower the limit. Sorry that you didn't realize what was going on after the second or third bet. If you were uncomfortable with the exposure at any time, you could have cut it. This is all on you. This is all on you guys. The NFL doesn't need to investigate anything here except your risk controls for NFL futures. Next time I have to have this conversation, I'm charging you $500 an hour for consulting, by the way. So one more quote from the Westgate here. If it was Jameis Winston at quarterback, we wouldn't have a problem with it, he said, he being Jay Cornegay, VP. But when it's Tom Brady you have a six-figure liability with, we're certainly not comfortable with it. That's a biggie. It's not about the player being in or out of the game tonight. You're talking about the best quarterback of all time playing or not playing. Again, I can't believe that quote. If I was a journalist, I would have said, do you really want that on the record? And I'm not a journalist. I don't consider myself a journalist. But do you really want that quote on the record is what I would have said. You're literally saying, oh, well, if it was another quarterback, we just would have taken your money. Like that's not bookmaking. I expect more from a relationship with a bookmaker than a bookmaker to come out and say something like that. Like if Jameis Winston was the quarterback, you wouldn't have a problem with it, but it's Tom Brady you have a six-figure liability with, you're certainly not comfortable with it. Okay, then cut your limits. Nobody forced you to take those bets. This is insane that's on the record, and you're crying about taking these bets here. And I haven't even got into Pro Football Talk picking it up. And Mike Florio has kind of turned into a late career Rick Riley who doesn't produce as much original content as he used to before. So he was just kind of parodying the facts and the quotes in the Review Journal, and Florio uses his platform to editorialize even more. And he says that how is this something the NFL could ignore? The Helen Lovejoy. Well, somebody think of the children. How could the NFL ignore this? And then he shills for his book, of course. Here's a link to his book in the article. He says a major sports book is openly accusing someone of securing and acting on unreported information that Brady is coming back. Yeah, that's the information game. Anybody had the ability to go out there and see Tom Brady was what he was doing last week, and if you got hit on it, that's your own problem. Go talk to your people in your office and say, hey, how come we got hit on this? Where was our risk control? Was anyone paying attention to this? Again, I'm charging you $500 an hour next time we have to talk about this. I charge $500 an hour to sportsbooks, PPHs, whatever, to consult with them and tell them about the stupid stuff they're doing and how to be less stupid. Next time we have to talk about this, it's going to be $500 an hour, Westgate. I will send you an invoice. So, again, just to sum it up, Westgate had no problem taking $5,000 a bet on the Bucs at 50-1 the day after Brady retired. They're just big mad and crying here now about their exposure, and they cried to the newspaper who printed it without any pushback. To quote I got a lot of people were talking about this morning on my my chats with other gamblers, and so I'm just gonna end this with quoting something that somebody else said to me. But perhaps we could describe those books who took large wagers on the basis that Brady absolutely, definitely wasn't coming back as not sharp. So think about that. Stop crying because you got hit. And think about ways to reduce that exposure, because you get to hold that money until, February almost? You get 11 months to hold that money. So instead of crying to a newspaper, why don't you figure out a way to reduce that exposure, and worry about it in 11 months. That's my advice, and next time it's going to cost $500 an hour. So thank you for listening to this extended version of the Wide World of Weingarten. Unfortunately, there will most likely not be new episodes on Thursday and Friday this week because of the NCAA tournament. I don't think that people want to hear me talk on Thursday and Friday when there's wall-to-wall basketball going on. We can pick up baseball next week nonstop. I promise there will be absolutely wall-to-wall baseball coverage coming up. But Thursday, though there won't be a show, I think the plan as of now is for me to be in studio with Gil from 7 to 9 in the morning, potentially, on the numbers game on VSiN. So like I said, there's not going to be some new episodes later this week, but Thursday morning I should be on VSiN itself on the network with Gil for an extended live show. So that'll be fun. Thank you for listening. If you listen to this whole thing, you know you got 100-1 AL MVP at the same book I was shitting on. But yeah, that's, like I said, you could shit on and complain about something and still make a bet with the same book. I'm large. I contain multitudes. Thank you for listening.